I discovered Randy Thompson when I was following actually first the Dakota Access Pipeline protest by the Standing Rock Sioux and their allies, and that was in 2016, 2017. And then I came across other protests of the Keystone XL pipeline, and saw some really interesting footage of farmer and citizen Randy Thompson sharing his take on the XL pipeline and its potential destruction of his property and other property across the Midwest. And I found it really inspiring. And for those watching who aren't familiar with any of this controversy, I can put some links below the video. So among other things, probably many other things, Randy Thompson is a Nebraskan farmer and also a graduate of the University of Northern Colorado, where I teach. 1970 graduate, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and through just serendipity, through a connection with a person who knows, who's friends with Randy's family, I discovered that it might be possible to reach out to him and invite him to have a conversation with me, and it happened. So I'm really honored and grateful that you're here, Randy, to share your thoughts as kind of an agent of change when it comes to grappling with really tough, really complicated problems like pipelines and the damage that they can cause to land, to property, to economy, to the finances of individual people, to the environment, and so forth. So thanks again for joining me today for this conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate you wanting me on.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk with you. So let's start. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about your background. What was your life before you started college at UNC, and what happened after? Let's take it right up to whatever you want to share, right up to the point of your involvement, and then then what I'll do is we'll kind of stop there. I'll show a little background on the pipeline protest, and then we can kind of dive into that one too. So just let's start with your life story up to that point, whatever you want to share.
Okay. Well, I guess if I had to describe myself, I'm just an old farm boy. And I grew up on a small farm. Just to give a little bit of background about my family and my parents, because this all really played into my determination to stop this pipeline. My parents were the product of the Great Depression, and they got married in 1933. And it's kind of an interesting story because my mom and her friend skipped school one day, and they went with my dad and his friend, and they got married. Which was, mom was 15 or 16 years old, dad was 19. And they came home and didn't tell anybody for like 3 months that they had gotten married. It probably wasn't a real uncommon thing back in those days, but anyhow, they started farming then in 1933, and they didn't raise a crop for 7 years. But they managed to struggle their way through all of that. And then they started renting farms. And so when I was a kid, we lived on rented property, and Dad worked on shares with the landowner. And so in 1975, they bought this 400-acre farm and ranch on the Platte River in central Nebraska. It's actually on a huge island it's actually right part of the Platte River system. And so anyhow, like I say, I was a farm boy. I was heavily involved in athletics and the FFA and that type of thing when I was in school. And I was very fortunate enough to get a scholarship to come to UNC, which was Colorado State College at that time, in 1966. And so in the fall of 1966, I came out, moved into Harrison Hall. I don't know if it's even there or not anymore. And then I was part of the 1969 undefeated football team, which today is still the record. Nobody else has ever matched that. So we're kind of proud of that. After I graduated in 1970, which was actually the first UNC class, because that's when they changed from CSC to UNC. I took a teaching and coaching job up in Lovell, Wyoming, clear up on the northern tip of Wyoming. But I found out teaching really wasn't what I wanted to do. I always liked agriculture and that type of thing. So after 2 years, I quit and I moved back to Nebraska and I went to work on a 50,000 acre ranch. And I did that for just a year. And then I've had quite a variety of jobs, honestly, so bear with me. I stayed there for a year and then I went to work for an implement dealer. And after 3 years of that, I decided I had to get a place of my own. So we ended up buying a small farm by Central City, Nebraska. And then after 3 or 4 years, we ended up buying a ranch up south of Burwell, Nebraska. And of course, that was right during 1980 when the farm crisis was going on. And so I was young and in debt, and I could see it wasn't going to work. So anyhow, we sold the ranch, sold all the cattle, and I went into the livestock auction business down in Clay Center, Kansas. And then after 3 years, I had an opportunity to buy a sale barn up in Albion, Nebraska, which was close to my parents, 45 miles. So we moved back up to Nebraska and we ran the sale barn there until 1998. And then we sold cattle and hogs and all that type of thing. And I was also involved in a personal property auction business. We did farm sales and household sales, all types of sales. We did hundreds of auctions. Then in 2004, unfortunately, my dad passed away. And so my mother moved into the listed assisted living home, and I became the farm manager for her. And that's when I had my first contact with the pipeline company. And it was quite innocent contact, the first few contacts. Got a phone call one day out of the blue, and this young fellow said, "Well, I'd like to visit with you about putting a pipeline across your property." And I said, "Well, I have no interest in having a pipeline run across my mom's place, you know." And because I was well aware of the ecosystem there. Being part of the Platte River system, our land was very sandy. And water table was extremely high. In the spring, if we would go down and dig a post hole to set a fence post, we would hit water. So I'm thinking, you know, this probably isn't the smartest idea to be planting some type of a pipeline in our land. If it leaks, you know, what's going to happen here? One thing, you know, all the currents from the Platte River run right underneath our property. So if it's an undetected leak, that oil and stuff could get into the water supply and you know, pollute the river. So he was quite insistent and he kept calling me. And so eventually agreed to meet with this guy. I had no idea what type of pipeline he was talking about. So we went over to the property where it was going to actually go through. And this was half pasture land and half corn, which is gravity irrigated, where you run the water down between the corn rows. So he started explaining that this pipe was going to go right through the middle of this cornfield and this pasture. And I said, "No, there's no way I'm interested in doing that." And you know, and it was a huge mistake if they would have taken me up on it. But I said, you know, you want to put your pipeline down at the end of the field there where it's not going to bother anything. I don't have a problem with doing that. He said, "Oh no, we can't do that." He said, we can't put that type of a bend in our pipe." Yeah. With, that's rather strange, that you can't make a 45-degree angle in a pipeline. So anyhow, this went on for several months, I guess, and he just kept calling me and trying to encourage me to do this, and I just kept resisting. And so finally he said, well, I want to meet with you. And so my brother and I met with him, and that's when we found out that the pipeline was going to be built by a Canadian company called TransCanada. So I thought mistakenly, we don't have any problem here because, that's a foreign company. That's from TransCanada is from Canada. There's no way that they can take our property if we don't want to give it up. And he said, well, we'd like to survey your property. And I said, well, I tell you what, you go ahead. I said, you don't want to waste your time doing it, you can go ahead and do it, So I'm feeling pretty confident we have the upper hand here, which found out later we definitely did not. So that's kind of the beginning of my experience with TransCanada.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. Yeah, to think about the slippery slope there. So let me jump into a little video that kind of sets the stage for what happened for you in terms of your involvement, or at least the public, when it went public about your involvement, and then we can kind of explore that, that next part of the next phase of the story. So.
My name's Randy Thompson. I'm a landowner from Nebraska. We have an 80-acre parcel that they want to come across with the pipeline. We really didn't think too much about it because we didn't think a foreign corporation could actually have the power to come and take our land away from us if we didn't want to give it up. We have a foreign corporation here trying to force their will upon the American people, and it's not right. There's no benefit to our country that I can see. We're an agricultural state. If we don't have water, we're out of business. This pipeline would be a few hundred feet from one of my irrigation wells. And if it were to contaminate that well, it would virtually take out 80 acres of crops for us. It doesn't do any good to complain to your neighbor across the fence. You need to make someone else hear your voice, someone that actually has the power to do something about it, and that being our politicians. So we need to make the message loud and clear to them. We're not happy with this project. Will our descendants look back and say, thank God our great-grandfathers had the foresight to protect the resources that we are now depending upon? Or will they say, what were the damn fools thinking about?
So that's kind of the picture that was presented, at least by the National Resource Defense Council, which obviously is allied with other groups to try to prevent this kind of these kinds of projects from happening. So, yeah, when you watch that and kind of recall the whole experience, what comes to mind about what you want to share about the behind the scenes look at all of that kind of thing that you got involved in? But maybe before you do that, let's pick up the story, that thread of the story you were telling right there before we watch the video. It sounds like, you went in there thinking this is a Canadian company. They can't just go tell us what to do because we're in a separate country. So, but you said, yeah, it turned out to be that they had a little bit more power than you thought. So what happened there?
Well, TransCanada had, the young guy wasn't getting any place with us, so they brought in a heavy hitter. And so he was very insistent about, trying to shove this thing down our throat. And he, finally we met one day with him and he said, well, we'll give you $9,000 to use your land for, and forever, really. There was no limit to as long as they wanted it. And we just said, there's no way we're gonna do that. And so then the next time we met with him, he said, I'll tell you what, we'll give you $18,000. He said, we're not interested in your damn money. We don't want your money. We don't want your pipeline. And so he said, well, I'm going to tell you what, guys, if you're smart, you're going to take this offer, because regardless of what you want to do, we're going to be putting this pipeline through your property within a year and a half. He said, because all the higher ups down in Lincoln, which is the state capital, they're all in favor of it. Well, lo and behold, in the long run, I found out he was absolutely right about them being in favor of it. But we're still waiting for the damn pipeline to come through after 15, 16 years. So, but that was very eye-opening to me when I started. I thought, I better start doing some investigating on this thing and find out a little bit more about it, because I was getting a little bit concerned that maybe our footing wasn't as firm as I thought it was. And so I contacted the governor's office, and I was thinking, there's just no way our legislature and our governor is going to flush us down the stool for some foreign company. And so I wrote the governor a letter asking him about, if this company, because they were starting to talk about using eminent domain against us. And so that really was, that was an alarm bell for me. And I wanted to know if they actually had that power. Well, so I contacted Governor Heineman, and he sent me back a real nice color brochure printed by TransCanada showing all about the pipeline, And as time went on, we found out that there was only 2 out of 50 of our legislators that would stand behind us. So that was very upsetting to me, that our own state legislature would, get behind a foreign company and not protect our property rights. And I can go on for this story for quite a while. You can shut me off whenever, but
No, this is all relevant. So yeah,
okay.
Keep going as long as you're, yeah.
But so I was getting really concerned and talked to a neighbor, and he said, well, he was going to go ahead and sign it. He said that, but they're talking like they're going to use eminent domain against us. And so there was a meeting, the first meeting they had was down in York, Nebraska. So I went down and attended that meeting, and they were talking about the pipeline and how safe it was going to be and all this and that.
Was this who set up that meeting?
Well, I think the State Department did.
Oh, okay. Yep.
But it was.
So it was one of those usual town meeting kinds of things where people come and get their 5 minutes to stand up and say something
Right.
about it, and then all of that stuff is collected by whoever's in charge. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because in fact, they had multiple meetings over the years, the State Department did. But that was kind of interesting, because I'd never been involved in anything like this, and I walked in the meeting, and there was a table sitting there with a pad where you could sign up to speak, and I had no intention of speaking. So I walked past the table, and then all of a sudden something clicked in me, and I went back and I signed my name. And so after they showed us a map of where the pipeline was going to go, it was right through the sandhills of Nebraska, which is absolutely the worst place in the world you could put a pipeline of this nature. And so after listening to that, I got up and I said, I think this is absolute craziness. Because I had lived in the sandhills. I worked on that big ranch up there in the middle of sandhills. I said, this is ridiculous. To put a pipeline like that through the sandhills, because you're going to just destroy that ecosystem, because it's taken years and decades to establish that grass on that sand. And if you tear that up, you're going to have some major blowouts, which are just, looks like a desert, And the ranchers up in that area fought those things for years and years. You know, they put old tires out there and tarps and everything else trying to prevent these blowouts. And if they would have put this pipeline through there, they would have destroyed a 100-foot wide strip of grass all the way along, because that's what it takes to put the pipeline in. Now, they don't just come in here and dig a trench and put it in. They have a 100-foot wide easement, and they destroy all that to get that pipe put in the ground. And so from that point forward, after that night, I thought, you know, I need to do whatever I can do to try and stop this thing. And so I kind of stepped out of my comfort zone. You know, I had never written a letter to the editor in my life, you know. Well, I sat down one night and I wrote a letter to the editor of the local paper, and took a while to convince myself to send it, but I did, and it got published. You know, I talked about, was concerned about this pipeline and what they were telling people. And so that was kind of my first step into activism, I guess. And then later I called the local TV station, and it took me 3 tries, because the first time I hung up, I was too nervous to talk to the guy. Second time I was too nervous. The third time I thought, what the hell, I'm gonna talk to this guy. This is important. So he was a news director, and I said, have you ever heard of the Keystone XL pipeline? And he said, no, haven't. I said, I think it's going to be a major news story. And kind of explained what was going on with me. So he sent out a news team and they interviewed me. And so that was kind of another first, you know, to do something like that. And, but, you know, I really didn't know which direction to go, because you could, you know, those things can only do so much, you know. Letter to the editor, calling the news, local news. So I got on the internet one night and I just started looking for anything I could find, you know, about the pipeline. And so I ran across this little deal. It was called Bold, Nebraska. And it said something about we're fighting the pipeline. So I got a hold of the gal that I sent her an email. Her name is Jane Pleb. Right, the best thing the most major decision, the luckiest decision that happened to me in this whole thing. So I contacted Jane, and she sent me back an email, and she said, yes, we're fighting this pipeline. But she had also been at the meeting in York, and I actually remember seeing her down at that meeting. And so she said, we'd love to have you come and join. So I went, they had a little meeting, and she had a little office here in Lincoln. It was kind of the upper story of a little old house, and kind of like a renovated attic, actually. And so that was where their office was. And I went up there, there's a handful of people, you know, 6, 7, I don't know. That was kind of the nucleus of the Bold, Nebraska thing. And so I really liked what they were saying, and you know, I could see that we were on the same page. So I definitely wanted to be part of that. And so I told Jane, you bet, I'm in on this deal. And so then, I don't know, a few weeks later, she called me one night. She said, I'd like to talk to you and about something. And so we met in York, Nebraska, and we had lunch, and she explained to me that they were going to start, they needed someone to be kind of the face of the opposition. And she said, we would like to have you be the face of the opposition if you're willing to. And she said, you know, you're going to open yourself up to a lot of criticism and, you know, this and that. And she was absolutely right about that. I said, I will, I'll do it. And so I don't know if you're familiar with that Stand with Randy thing or not.
I'm a little bit familiar with it. I came across it in doing the background research for this conversation, but maybe for those who aren't familiar and to give me a little bit more depth, you could explain that whole thing.
Well, she started this campaign called Stand with Randy. And they made posters and stuff, put them up all over, and asking people to come and stand with me and support me and the whole opposition thing. And so that's kind of how that got going. And then ended up, and they made all kinds of t-shirts and everything else with my image on it. I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy, but anyhow, that's how that all got started. And then I stayed very involved. And are you familiar with Jane Webb?
I'm familiar with that group, but no, I'm not familiar with the individuals or with Jane in particular.
Okay.
No.
Well, she was a major player. She's actually has become the head of the Democratic Party in Nebraska since then, but she's a young gal, and she knows the ins and outs of politics. And so she was really the ringleader for us, and she knew how to get the media there. We had different protests and stuff, and she got the media to come in, and which was tremendously helpful. Because, you know, you can have all the protests you want, but if nobody sees it, it doesn't do any good. And so, it kind of started out, we had some protests up at the Capitol building and that type of thing. The media all showed up, and then she set up one night. Well, maybe give you a little more background on that. The legislature was just laying down for TransCanada. And so we wanted to force the legislature to do something about eminent domain and giving it to these pipelines and all that. And so we felt we had to bring it to the public attention. And so we had a rally at the state capitol, which I spoke at. And to our amazement, there was like 500-600 people showed up. And then after it was in the evening, and then after we spoke, we went down, we surrounded the governor's mansion, and everybody had candles and flashlights and stuff. And so we got the governor's attention. So he called a special session in the legislature and to address some of these issues involving the pipelines. And they eventually passed a bill, but as you might guess, they exempted TransCanada from the bill. So none of this stuff applied to them. And so we also had two tremendous attorneys that were willing to work with us on this, Dave Domina and Brian Jordy, his stepson. So after legislature exempted them, they said, well, the governor can make the decision on these pipelines. So Domina said, I think we have a court case here. We think that's illegal. And so we brought a lawsuit against the governor for trying to being able to make this decision on these pipelines. And we won the district court and eventually ended up in the Supreme Court, which they made no decision on it. They couldn't get a majority, so they just, it's kind of like playing a football game, and all of a sudden at the third quarter, the referee decided to go home. Said, we're not going to do anything else.
Yeah.
That was a big part of it. And then as we got more and more involved, I ended up going back to Washington, D.C., which those films were made. I think the first one was made. We just went back, a group of us went back to Washington, D.C. to lobby our representatives. And that first film you showed, we were there, that's when that film was made. And we talked to all our representatives, the ones that would even meet with us, which was quite disturbing. But one of our representatives had his staff members take us back in this little storage room underneath something like a little concrete storage room, and that's she said, well, he's too busy to meet with you, but I'll listen to your concern, you know, which I thought, that's great, you know. So that's kind of where we saw, you know, this thing is not going very good here for our political leaders. And then the second film we had, that was, I spoke at went back again, and I spoke they had a big State Department hearing, and there was hundreds of people showed up for that. And that's when I spoke at that. And then I eventually went back again, and I spoke to Congress about it. So, you know, that was all some pretty different stuff for me to get involved in. And then I don't know if you know or not, but I ended up getting arrested.
No, I did not know that. So yes, I'd like to hear more about that. How did that happen?
Well, it was actually an invitation to get arrested. And all the people, you know, like the Wildlife Federation, all those people, and there was a lot of people involved in, you know, trying to stop this thing. And so they invited 100 of us to come to Washington, D.C. with the express purpose of getting arrested at the White House for protesting. And so we did. We all showed up. Of course, you know, the police all knew what was going on. You know, they knew we were there to get arrested. So when we got to the White House fence, the cops had a tent set up there and a processing booth and everything, and they were just waiting. So it was kind of weird because Bobby Kennedy Jr. was right behind me, and James Hansen, the NASA climatologist, was standing right next to me. In fact, I talked with him for probably an hour. And
Wow, that's amazing.
anyhow, they arrested all of us one at a time, and they put us in the paddy wagon and hauled us down to the jailhouse, made us pay $100 and send us on our way.
But was that intended to kind of get the press, you know, to attract press attention?
Absolutely.
And was it effective?
Oh my God. It was, there was, I don't know how many countries were represented there by the media. But I had companies from Finland call me, want an interview, and, you know, there were hundreds of journalists there just surrounding us as we were standing up against the White House fence. So yeah, it was pretty effective. It got their attention. And of course, you know, at that time, we were trying to get Obama to stop this thing and deny the permit. And so that was one of the major events we had to try and do that. And ended out that was pretty effective.
So, okay, so I want to go back a little ways to kind of dial it back to earlier in the story when you mentioned, it seems like it's kind of a turning point. I don't know if you see it that way, but felt like it to me when you talked about going to that one town meeting where you walked by the table where you're supposed to sign up to say your piece, and you walked by the table and then you turned around and you went back. Can you kind of reflect on that time and say what really do you think made you turn around and put your name down? Because later on you're saying, you know, you tried to call was it the governor's office, or was it I think it was the governor's office, right? Where you tried 3 times. Sorry?
That was a TV.
Yeah, TV station. And you called and it took 3 times. So there's hesitancy there, but you really pushed, like you used the word comfort zone. You got out of your comfort zone. So that first point there, what made you turn around and put your name down, do you think?
I don't know to this day, you know. You know, this whole thing, I think a lot of it was my parents and how they affected me, and I wanted to protect their property. I'm sorry. You know, they worked their entire life. And to get this piece of land. And then here a company from Canada come down and they think they have the right to just strip that away and put that property in jeopardy. You know, if that pipeline would leak in my mother's pasture or cornfield or whatever, it could have destroyed her entire what they built up. You know, and she needed that property. She was living in assisted living. That was her living. That's what kept her going. And you know, if it had been my own property, I don't know if I had had the same effect on me. If I knew what my folks went through, I'd just be damned. So I was going to stand back and let somebody do that to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm curious also, you mentioned that you were warned by Jane that in becoming the face of the protest that you were going to attract some, you know, some negative some negative reactions. Are there any stories about those reactions that you can share with us?
So, you know, well, first of all, I didn't want to give anybody the opportunity to, you know, legitimately criticize me because of something I said or what I put on Facebook or whatever, because I don't do social media, you know. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to let them take their shots at me. I'm not going to respond. I never did. You know, it's things like, you know, just little crap. Like some guys on there said, oh, you know, they make this guy out to be some big cowboy, but the truth is that Jane Pleb just took him down to the Western store and bought him an outfit and put him on a poster. You know, I didn't respond to that, but I didn't respond to any of it. And, you know, and the other thing, other guys, some of Trans Canada's people would say, you know, Thompson's just a fraud or he's a phony, or, you know, Jane Clabb just coaching him. And well, she was coaching me on how to fight this thing. But other than that, you know, but without her guidance, we wouldn't have got where we're at.
That took a lot of strength on your part. I've got to say, that takes a lot of courage because, you know, nowadays social media is just so destructive to people's lives, and people just do a pile on. Yep. And you know, they're coming from all corners and they just attack, and it can ruin a person. So that must have taken a lot of courage to be able, even just to not respond, right? Because I'm sure that in your mind is all these things you want to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of things
right?
I want to say.
Hey, but you know it's going to maybe make it worse, and then you decide not to say anything. That takes a lot of strength.
It does, you know. If you're willing to get on this social media stuff, you know, you're, like you say, you're really going to open yourself up. You know, and you know, you got some clown behind a computer somewhere in a basement, and he's criticizing you and what you're doing, and he knows all about you and he knows nothing about you. But they say what they think or what they want people to think, and I'm just not going to give them the satisfaction of responding to it. I mean, I know who I am. I know I've worn out more goddamn cowboy hats and boots and pants than those clowns that could have put in their whole house, you know.
Exactly. So part of that is just, yeah, is knowing yourself. And maybe that's where some people struggle, is because maybe there's a little bit of, I don't know, they don't have that real connection. You got that connection to your family history, you got the connection to the land, and you got the connection to your own history of blood, sweat, and tears, investing in your own and your family's future. So that's kind of unshakable, and I think that probably is a little bit different than some folks who are just living on social media and don't have that, I don't know, that solidity or whatever that it takes to be able to hold up against those people and their false claims. So yeah, that seems like it kind of carried you. If I can say this, and tell me what you think, but it seems like that thing is what carried you through this whole process, in all the ups and downs of it, and putting yourself out of your comfort zone so many times, and then finding yourself testifying before Congress, and all the other things, getting arrested and all the other things that happened. There must have been a lot of moments where you're saying, I can't believe I am here. I can't believe this is happening. Never would have imagined this, 10 years ago or something like that.
Well, that's for sure. As my nature is, I'm a pretty quiet guy, and I rarely speak out unless I see something that I think is wrong, and then I will definitely speak up, But just to make noise and draw attention to yourself, that's not me. That's not who I am, and never have been, never will be. So, what that's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask this, the Obama administration took some action, and then that action was reversed by the next administration. And then what was that like? Yeah, let's walk through that a little bit, because it felt like progress was being made. And then it seemed like probably the whole thing got just turned on its head again.
Yeah, that was, I guess, from the very beginning, I don't know if any of us ever believed we could actually stop this thing. But I was determined to give it all I had to try and stop it. At least I'd have that satisfaction that they didn't just walk through here and take what they wanted without a fight. Yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought. Give me your question.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, I'm imagining that, you get arrested, there's press coverage all over the world. The Obama administration kind of takes notice, takes some action. But then, as happens in a democracy, you get a different administration voted in. And so that, from the look of it, there was a complete reversal. So everything that his administration did to try to stop it just got reversed. And what was that like to have to face that?
Well, it was difficult. And, when Obama did deny the permit, that was a huge deal. That shut it down. But, in the back of our minds, I guess that's where I was going with this, my former comments. We never really felt secure that this was going to last, because we knew if you got a new administration, it could be reversed. And that's exactly what happened. So, we, after Obama denied the permit, we did have a big party, and, we all got together and partied and stuff. But, like I say, I don't think any of us really felt that confident that it wasn't going to come back. Because like the Loch Ness Monster, it keeps sticking its head up. Every time you think it's gone, the SOB shows up again. And that's kind of the way it's been. So, you know, of course, Trump, first day in office, he gives them a permit again. So here we go again, you know, and luckily, I think now it is finally dead. Because, you know, I think this company can only stand about so much. They've spent like $15 billion already, which was their own fault, you know, because they got way ahead of themselves. You know, before they even came into Nebraska, they thought they had this thing in the bag. I mean, they were storing pipe up in North Dakota. They had a huge pipe field up there. They were storing pipe up there, getting ready to build this thing. And I think they even built some transfer stations and stuff that were never used, luckily. But they were so confident that they had all the political backing that they needed. You know, they just forged ahead, and they got the cart ahead of the horse, you know, as it turned out. But I mean, they spent billions of dollars, you know, and these guys have every trick in the book. You know, they come into these small towns and they talk to this city council. And, oh, well, your little league team needs some new uniform, you know, we'll buy all those for you. So, I mean, I always said these guys should own Jiffy Lube because they know every wheel to grease. And they're damn good at it. And I mean, they had guys out here like crazy, and they would talk to every city council, every county board, and they had these people eating out of their hands, you know, because, oh, well, we're going to build this for you, or do this for you. Look at all this tax money you're going to get. And so these county boards, they gobble that up, you know. I always say, you know, if you want to hook a politician, just put a dollar bill on the hook and hang it out in front of him, and they're going to go for it. You know, that's kind of the way it is. And with this tax money, I'm not saying, oh, they go into individual politicians' money account, but, you know, if they think they can get some tax dollars to, like our county, we had some real interesting meetings with those guys, you know, and but they were 100% on board with this thing because the Trans-Canada guy was just living with them, you know, and just so when we had this big meeting, first of all, they had the cops there because they were afraid of us. They thought we were some kind of terrorist or something. And several of us went to the meeting and expressed our thoughts on the thing. And we would ask the board different questions, you know, about the pipeline. Every question we asked them, they referred to answer from the Trans-Canada guy. They'd say, well, we're not sure, but I think Jeff can answer that question for you. I said, asked the head of the board, I said, you know, if this pipeline were to rupture and catch on fire, do you think your local fire department down here is going to be able to go out there and extinguish that thing? Because this pipeline would have carried 800,000 barrels of this toxic solution every day through our land. That's 32 million gallons every day. You got a pipe that's the size of a hula hoop. So I said, okay, if this thing breaks and then it catches on fire, is the local fire department going to be able to put that out? And so the head of the board asked the Trans-Canada guy, he said, well, Jeff, is this stuff even flammable? We're talking oil, all kinds of solvents. It's not. Jeff says, well, yeah, it is flammable. I mean, that's the kind of ridiculous crap we put up with. There was no different at the state down here at the legislature, you know? We would go up there and at the meetings, and it was just ridiculous. One of our state legislators introduced a bill which would allow TransCanada to come onto our land without permission and survey it. I mean, that's how crazy it got. Luckily, a bunch of us went up to that meeting and we expressed our opinion on that, and we had one of the legislators was all behind us on that deal, and the guy withdrew the bill right there. So, but you know,
Has there been a shift in the legislature as a result of this, so that there are more, you know, folks elected who are kind of siding with the landowners, or is it still the same, you know, status quo?
you know, that's a good question. I don't really know, honestly. I haven't been up there for a while, but I am hoping that, you know, I don't know if you heard about the big spill on the Keystone 1 pipeline.
Yeah, I heard about that.
I'm hoping that'll open some eyes, you know. And I think because the really discouraging part about this, Mike, was, you know, our legislators weren't even willing to listen or do any type of investigation about what could happen with this thing. Even when it was going to come right through the sand hills. You know, we couldn't even get these guys to come, like when the State Department came out and held their hearings, and there'd be hundreds of us landowners and stuff down there testifying. And of course, TransCanada would bring in bus loads of union workers and pay them to come and just sit, you know, make it look good for them. But none of our state legislators would even come to those hearings. And yet they were all in favor of this pipeline, you know. I've often said the only thing the legislature didn't do was hold a Valentine's dance so they could hold each other close, them and TransCanada. I mean, that's kind of the way it was, you know. And we go up to those hearings, and some of those legislators would do everything possible to downgrade us and make us look foolish. And, you know, I saw a gal that was testified, and when she left, they had her in tears. She was crying because of the way they treated her. And I mean, it was that way for most everybody that testified. You know, if they thought they could run over you, they would take advantage. They would try and make you look like a fool. And that was one thing tremendously disappointing to me, and still is. You know, I'm still angry about that.
Yeah, I bet. Do you feel like, I guess, you know, now that the Biden administration has, you know, revoked the permit, I mean, you were saying earlier, okay, you kind of felt, you know, after when the Obama administration kind of stepped in there and revoked it, you were like, yeah, I don't think it's over yet, you know. Do you feel like it's over? And if you do or you don't, you know, is life returned to normal for you now, or do you feel like you're kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop or something like that?
I feel like it's over with. I think the Keystone XL did, because they've actually, I think they scrapped all that pipe they had stored up there in North Dakota. You know, they have miles and miles and miles of pipe up there that has been in the elements, sitting out in the elements for over a decade. And there's no way they could use that pipe. And so they're scrapping that, or have scrapped it. And they have said that they're done with it. So I feel pretty confident that they are. Because I think maybe in the back of their mind, they know we're not going away, you know, we're not. And they've tried us every way they could, and we beat them.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Yeah. And of course, there are other, you know, projects out there in the country that are threatening other people's land and their family histories, like you kind of pointed out. So do you feel like your life has returned to normal for you? You're kind of just back to doing what you always wanted to do, and you put this behind you, or where are you at in terms of your thinking about all of that?
Well, I feel like my life's pretty much back to normal, but on the one hand, I do, but on the other hand, I don't feel like the same person I was when this all started, you know? Because it's had a pretty dramatic effect on me. And, you know, in all honesty, it's been a challenge, you know, they challenge you mentally. When you start getting letters from this huge corporation saying, Mr. Thompson, you're not being cooperative. And if you don't come around within 30 days, we're going to start eminent domain proceedings against you. And this before they even have a damn permit to build the pipeline. You know, and it was that kind of stuff constantly. You know, it got to the point, and I'm not the only landowner that feels this way. I got to the point I didn't even want to go to the mailbox because there might be another certified envelope from TransCanada, you know, with whatever bullshit they have for you. And, you know, they keep the pressure on you constantly. And through the whole process, you know, their land agents were relentless, making a difference. How many times you told them no, you told them don't want to talk to you again. They just kept calling, they kept coming, you know. And got to the point where, and this went on for years, I would wake up in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was thinking about this stuff and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was so frustrated with our political system and their failure to take care of their own citizens that it's had a real effect on me. And I'm just now kind of getting back where I can sleep all night. And it's been, well, this all started in 2007. So it's been 16 years.
Wow.
And, but yeah, I have my cattle and horses, and not many, but kind of do what I do, you know.
Yeah. Wow. It seems like a theme running through this whole thing is resilience, doesn't it? You subjected yourself so much, you made the choice to do that. And then you know, took on the consequences and it changed you. Do you feel like it changed you in some ways for the better, or did it just kind of beat you up?
Well, a little bit of both, you know.
Okay.
But it really has opened my eyes, you know. Because prior to all this happening, I didn't pay any attention to politics. You know, I guess I was too busy making a living, and I was working basically 7 days a week. And so you know, it's made me a lot more aware. And of course, I'm retired now too, but I pay a lot more attention to what's going on, and especially in politics and that type of thing. And you know, we have to be vigilant as citizens, because if we're not, we're just giving it away, you know. And truthfully, you know, before this all started, I had every confidence in our legislature and our governor that they would stand up for us, you know, because we're Nebraska citizens. And especially if it's a foreign company that's wanting to come in and take away our property rights. I didn't think there's any way in hell that would ever happen. So that was really eye-opening to me. And so I'm a lot more aware of politically, I guess, is one of the big changes that's happened to me.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Wow, this is an amazing story. It's kind of it's a powerful story, and I really appreciate you sharing it with me and with anybody that's watching this thing, because there's a lot to be learned from your experience, and a lot to be learned from your wisdom that's arisen from the experience, and that you've brought into, your way of dealing with this and getting involved. Some of the folks that are watching this are going to be my students, and there's a lot of young people out there right now in the world facing a lot of problems that are happening. All kinds of social problems, environmental problems, just on and on. And I get the feeling that there's a sense of, helplessness for some of them, a sense of being alone, unable to grapple with the issues that they're confronted with. So, just in listening to your experience, I feel like there are answers in what you've already shared for them. But I thought, just to kind of cap off our conversation, maybe if you could think of some advice for the next generation that they could use to confront these issues that are so important to them. Just open it up for you to share whatever you want to share.
Well, I think if I learned one thing from this experience was, don't give up. Because I can tell you the odds against us winning this battle was about less than 1%. But yet, if you work together, and that's important, and as a generation, be aware of what's happening, and take your politicians to task. They love nothing better than to have you sit back and not pay attention, because then they can do whatever they damn well please. So pay attention. It's our country, and it's probably won't be mine much longer because I'm getting old, but the next generation, you can hang in there, you can do it. And I'm encouraged by electric cars and that type of thing that's becoming way more popular, and even in the farming community, which is one of the last places the climate thing, was taking hold. They're becoming aware that we do have a problem with our climate. And if we don't do something pretty soon, we're going to have a major problem. And so we're seeing a lot of trends in agriculture going towards cover crops, and which puts more nutrients back in the soil, and it protects the erosion and all that type of thing. So I'm very encouraged by that. And I do think like solar and wind and is becoming so popular. And I think that really is tremendously beneficial to the future of our country. Sometimes you just have to hang in there and take the criticism and listen to all the BS about, all these electric cars, what the hell you want one of them damn things for, Say, okay, you drive what you want to drive, I'll drive what I want to drive. But, I think the next generation, I feel good about the next generation. I have grandkids that are in their early 20s now, and they're environmentally aware. The time I've grown up, I've seen such a change, because it used to be, all the farmers, they had a ditch somewhere out there, and they would, their tin cans and pop bottles, beer cans, whatever they had, they threw them in a ditch, and just that type of thing. And irrigation, we used to waste so much water irrigating, and now with the pivots and all the different type of irrigation systems, that's much better. So yeah, I think we're headed in the right direction, and I have a lot of faith in our next generation. I hope they're better than mine was. My generation was the Woodstock generation. They were supposed to save the world. I'm pretty damn disappointed in my generation. So all I can say is give them hell. Do the best you can. Hang in there.
Love it. Well, Randy, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I've learned so much from you. And I appreciate the time you took to meet with me and share that whole story. Every minute of it was really fascinating and informative. And I know it will be for others. So thank you so much for for doing this today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I'll be coming out to see the bears one of these days. 10 years.
That sounds like a good deal.